It's time for another edition of Weird Street Fighter Games, and today we're going to be looking at this. This is the Street Fighter 2 plug and play. Let's get into it. Bosh! It's time for another edition of Weird Street Fighter Games, and in today's discussion, we're going to be going toe-to-toe with Street Fighter 2, the Plug and Play Edition. It comes designed as an arcade stick. Pretty decent looking joystick, in fact. 6 buttons. But even though there is only one game on this unit, the buttons aren't labelled as light, medium and heavy punches, light, medium and heavy kicks. Instead, they're labelled A, B, C, X, Y and Z. So wait a minute, is this the arcade that you're going to be getting here? Because this sounds more like it's going to be an emulated Sega Mega Drive version of Street Fighter 2. Let's find out. Now, plug and play games are perfect stocking stuffers at Christmas, and there's been a ton of them over the years. Often they come on weirdly shaped controllers, and they can vary as to how many games they come with built in. In the case of this Street Fighter 2 one, the device is shaped like a single player arcade stick, and it has precisely one game on here. And no, it's not Street Fighter 2. Instead, it's the Sega Mega Drive / Genesis version of Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition. But actually, it's not even quite that. Allow me to explain. Even though this thing is just called Street Fighter 2, it lists on the box that this is a 16-bit version of the game. And this is true, it definitely is 16-bit. But this isn't the same version that came out on the Super Nintendo, and is instead an altered version of the Sega Mega Drive Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition. And the differences are many, and I'll say straight off that none of them are for the better. At some point in this series where I'm looking at weird Street Fighter games, I'll eventually get to the good versions of Street Fighter 2 instead of it just being weird ones, and when I do consider that the Sega Mega Drive game to be one of the good ones. And whilst this is almost the Sega Mega Drive game, it has some baffling alterations and choices around this release that make it justifiably weird and borderline bad. This game is definitely the Mega Drive version of Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition, but they have tinkered with it. The first clue is that it comes up with the logo of MSI Entertainment LLC, and fair enough, as they're the people who have released this, but this is the first warning that these people have messed with the code. From here you get the title screen, which confirms that this is Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, but also, and impressively I may add, adds the year 2018 to the credits at the bottom of the screen. Now we're cooking. What else have they got planned for us in store? So, there's no menu like you'd got on the Mega Drive version. It says press start and there is a start button, but if you want more options like you'd get in the Sega home conversion, they're not here. This means you can't change the difficulty. Is this a worry? Have they set this at the hardest level to give a true arcade experience that would eat up all your money for extra credits? Or have they gone for the middle ground? Challenging for new players, but probably a breeze for experienced players. No, they've not done that either. Now, I'm not certain on this, but they may have actually set this on near the easiest difficulty level possible. I could tell this was easy, as I could go straight up to opponents and grab them into throws, and they wouldn't put up any fight. I even beat Bison on my first attempt. Now, that isn't to say that I won every single fight, but the reason I lost a few is something that makes this release particularly strange, and I'll get onto that soon. Even though MSI have tinkered with the game and removed the menu and the ability to listen to the sound menu, change the difficulty and the speed, so no turbo mode here, the game is all essentially there. There are all 8 original playable characters from Street Fighter 2, and there's also the 4 boss characters because this is Special Champion Edition. The game even displays the 2-player press start sign flashing at the top of the screen, even though this is absolutely a 1-player game with no chance of a 2-player game. And that is because this is just a single joystick and there is not a way to attach another one to it. So yeah, this was odd. They removed the menu option for a 2-player game, but they left the tease of a 2-player game by forever asking player 2 to press start on a controller that cannot be plugged in. But now let's address the ginormous elephant in the room. And no, I don't mean the one on Dulcim's stage. I got my unit recently off of eBay, and I'll be honest, I got it so I could make a video on it for this video series based on the weird Street Fighter games. I'd had it for a few weeks but only just plugged it in, and I was truthfully a little bit annoyed to find that it doesn't work properly. I mean, yeah, the unit switched on. I instantly noticed that it was definitely a janky version of the Mega Drive game, but the real trouble started when I began to play. The unit, for some reason, has a joystick that will perfectly move up, down, left and right, but wouldn't register when you do any diagonal movements at all. Now, my spidey sense told me that maybe all hope was not lost, as it seemed weird that up, down, left and right would work so well. You can make the character jump upwards, you can make them duck, you can make them walk left, you can make them walk right, but the diagonals do nothing at all. This meant that you can't jump over your opponent. It also meant you can't pull off any fireballs or hurricane kicks or anything like that. I also did look up a couple of online reviews of this unit and found that other people had the exact same issue. I mean, did Capcom and this MSI company really put out an arcade joystick where it is impossible to jump over your opponent or pull off half the special moves in the game, including the moves, all of the special moves that Ryu and Ken do, like a dragon punch or a fireball? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes. It is impossible to do this with the unit as they sold it to people. Now, when I realised this was the issue, I felt that maybe I should open this thing up to see if there's something that isn't connecting, or maybe something has come loose. But before I did this, I figured I'd play through the game as much as possible to capture footage in case something went wrong and I completely bricked it. Now, the good news is, with limitations come new challenges and also comes creativity. I decided that I would see if it was possible to beat Street Fighter 2 under these conditions, where I couldn't use diagonals at all. I've heard of people doing blindfold runs or doing a game with only 1 credit, so this would just be an interesting and different challenge, where you can't use diagonals. So, to do a no diagonal run, the first thing I had in my favour is that this game seems to be fixed on a very easy mode, so I knew that beating the game without diagonals may at least be possible. The next issue would be choosing the optimal character for this challenge. My usual choice of Ryu and Ken didn't seem a good fit at all, as their specials require hitting diagonals, although their throw moves were still quite powerful if I could get in close enough to opponents. With the likes of Sagat and Guile throwing projectiles though, I knew that getting in close may be a challenge. I could jump up to dodge projectiles, but then I would just have to edge my way in. I did try Ryu and Ken for a little bit, but I felt there must be something better. Next up, I chose Guile, as I could pull off his sonic boom by holding left and then hitting right and punch without needing a diagonal, and his flash kick by holding down and then hitting up and kick. Unfortunately, when against other projectile throwers, you often get into a war of throwing sonic booms or fireballs or yoga fires just to block and cancel out the other character's projectile, without ever being able to jump over the projectiles and get closer at the same time. This quickly felt tedious and that they were getting the better of me. I still needed to explore other tactics. Next in, I looked to Blanka, Chun-Li, and E-Honda, as they all have special moves that you can pull off just by tapping a single punch or kick button. This may have been my secret weapon, but I still needed to get in close to pull these moves off. Now, E-Honda seemed a good fit, as he has a special where he can send himself in as a projectile to achieve a headbutt, and you don't need to use a diagonal motion to pull it off. E-Honda worked for a little while, but again, when faced against the likes of Ken or Guile and their fireballs, they would damage E-Honda before he could even get close. And then I found the solution. Bison. His sliding low kick and his psychic crusher were both moves that will move you across the screen, and in particular, when you hit a psychic crusher, even if your opponent blocks, he will continue to fly through them. This is unlike someone like E-Honda or Blanka, that when they fly in with a projectile using their own bodies or heads, they will bounce off someone if they block, but Bison will pass through them and actually take off some of the opponent's energy at the same time. Now, of course, an opponent will be able to stop the Psychic Crusher by hitting it with a fireball, but more often than not, when they see the Psychic Crusher coming in, they'll either try to jump over you or block this move, and if they block, they're still going to take some hits and lose some energy. Success! Even though I didn't have diagonals, I found I needed only a few attempts to figure out strategies against Ken and Sagat, and I was still able to beat Street Fighter II Champion Edition by changing up characters and dominating as Bison. So okay, now that I've beaten it, I could risk bricking this thing by opening it up to see what's happening inside. Now, as it happens, I was able to fix the unit quite easily, and anyone who has this but not been able to pull off any diagonal moves, well, you should take note because it is an easy solution. For some mad reason, this stick has a circular plate around the joystick, and when you move it up, down, left or right, you can hear the stick register with a click. But when you hit diagonals, you don't hear it register anything. By removing the plastic and adding a screw back in to secure the joystick, it now works perfectly. Well, as perfectly as a janky version of Mega Drive Street Fighter II can work, that is. So if you have an arcade stick that has this issue, and in particular if you have this or another one from MSI, this may be an easy fix by removing this unneeded piece of plastic. Oh, and let's talk about the graphics of this thing. This is a plug and play that released in 2018, but doesn't connect via HDMI. Now, it's not the end of the world, and a bunch of plug and plays kept going this method for years and years. But it doesn't mean it's okay. It connects via composite cables, and even then it's just the white and yellow ones at that. No red audio cable here. When plugging this into my old CRT TV, it looks just as I remember the game looking on the Mega Drive, and is a nostalgic trip through my childhood. But two things here. One, I'll need to connect this to my capture card to get footage, and there's not a lot of good options when it comes to connecting composite cables into a capture card. This thing released in 2018, and when you consider that gaming started going high definition with the release of the Xbox 360 in 2005, and this came out 13 years after that, the choice to release this not using HDMI is a bit baffling. It's not like HDMI cables are expensive after all. Connecting this to my computer, my HD TV stretched the image, and it looks far worse in the footage than what you're seeing when it's connected to my old school CRT TV. Muddy and blurry graphics do spoil the fun somewhat. But the next issue was the sound. Let's listen to what the Sega Mega Drive game is supposed to sound like when it loads up. And now let's hear what this thing sounds like. It's slow and terrible sounding. And let's check out the speed difference between the two. And let's look at the two again, but this time just hearing the audio from the plug and play, but with the two sped up to be the same time, just to see if it sounds so bad because it's just running slow. So whilst not perfect, I'd say that's definitely an improvement. So literally, instead of this being Street Fighter 2 Turbo, this is actually Street Fighter 2 Slow-Mo. Did no one at Capcom say this isn't good enough? Or did they just sell the rights to the company MSI and not think to check in on it at all? To be honest, I can believe that is the situation, as although this was 2018 and you'd think Capcom would know better, this is the same company that in the early 1990s allowed the likes of US Gold to release botched versions of Street Fighter 2 on the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64, and hence this entire weird Street Fighter game series. So, that will begin to wrap things up for another edition of Weird Street Fighter games here. This isn't the only Street Fighter plug and play game that's out there, and I may get to another day. Although, from my understanding, these also have the Sega Mega Drive Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition game on them. They come with classic Mega Drive style controllers, so hopefully they shouldn't be plagued by the janky made joystick on this plug and play. So that's going to wrap things up for this edition of Weird Street Fighter games. This is edition number 11 in the series, so do check out all of the others if you haven't seen them before, and there are still plenty more Weird Street Fighter games out there that we'll cover another day. If you haven't done so already, I would appreciate if you would smash that subscribe button here on the Geek Battle Gaming YouTube channel, and as always, you can check out the written article version of today's discussion over on www.xstreamed.tv/gaming. And with that, until next time, stay safe, always stay extremed, and ciao for now. Sonic boom, and we're off the air.